Welcome to the Stressless Eating Podcast, where we help diet-obsessed and food-crazed women break themselves out of the food and body prison, end the dieting madness, and take control of their health for good. I'm your host, Leanne Ellington, and this podcast is about answering one question. How can you heal your relationship with food and your body and take a practical approach to this whole self-love journey, but without all that restriction, obsession, and shame, and without needing years of therapy just to do so? If you want to know the answer, you're in the right place. All this information is 100% free, so please subscribe to and review our podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Stressless Eating Podcast. And I am so grateful. We have Laura Lea Bryant back on the podcast. She also happens to be one of my best friends, but what a beautiful opportunity that we get to just pick her brain. And today we are going to talk about this concept of stressless cooking and how to take the stress, the emotion, the obsession out of cooking and really make friends with your kitchen. So first off, hello, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, friend. Thank you for having me. So fun.
Yes. So before we dive in, I'll just kind of share how this all came about. You know, Laura Lea and I have been friends for I think close to 5 years now. And it has been. But, you know, when we would talk about our different lines of work, you know, what we discovered is there was some crossover where, you know, I was talking about women that have this really stressful, emotional, deprivation-based relationship with food. Well, some of the themes would cross over because, you know, when a lot of women think about cooking, it becomes a source of stress. Some of it, for some women, it actually becomes a source of shame because they don't know how, or they think they're not a good cook or whatever. So we got together, we had a magical weekend in Asheville, North Carolina, and we created Stressless Cooking to give to my stressless eating clients to really just help them take the stress, the emotion, any of the negative associations that they have alongside food and cooking and prepping their food and prepping their meals, and really give them a streamlined kind of mindset around that. And so what we wanted to do today on this episode is really just kind of give you all the Cliff Notes version of that and share some of the thoughts that we pass along to our clients. And obviously Laura Lea shares it in all of her cooking classes and to her meal plan community and all of that. But we want to just give you all access to that right now. So first, before we dive in, and I'm going to just totally pick your brain, Laura Lea, and just utilize and leverage your expertise. But before we start off, you know, a big thing when it comes to becoming a stressless cook is first, we've got to really, you know, shift our mindset around cooking and really get into this space, you know? And so we go pretty deep into this in Stressless Cooking, but we talk about like, you know, really changing your relationship with food and spoil your body with foods. We talk about like, you know, why it's important to ditch the packaging and the chemicals. We talk about why it's important to ditch the clock and not use a time to help you determine when you eat and all that. Really part of it, if you guys are sensing a theme here, is changing your relationship with food first and foremost. Because if you have this air quotes negative relationship with food, you're going to bring it with you into the kitchen, right? And we talk about, you know, this art of, you know, knowing your hunger inside and out, and then obviously practicing stressless eating. So again, it's a mindset shift around food before we even get into cooking. A lot of women are like, just tell me how to take the stress out of cooking. And it's like, no, we've got to talk about the mindsets around food. So would you kind of just speak into that and what you've experienced for yourself? Obviously, we've been working together with my stressless eating clients for a while now too. Just kind of share your thoughts before we dive into the stressless cooking side of it, you know, about changing your mindset around food before you even step into the kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, for the first probably 6 years of my business, I wasn't even practicing that myself. And that showed up where I was victim to whatever food rules I determined were right. You know, for me, it was sort of this obsession with everything being healthy according to what I learned in my culinary school or what my wellness peers taught me. And I came up with this, you know, arbitrary system of right and wrong and on the wagon, off the wagon with my own food sort of philosophy. And actually, and I almost never talk about this, I actually everyone knows their own body and their own kind of like set point. And I didn't need to gain or lose weight, but I ended up gaining a little bit of weight for me personally, because I had this idea of you must eat at this time and I have to include all these different things. I can't have these things. And so the result was I ended up like overeating healthy, quote, healthy foods, like, just granola or whatever it was, almond flour crackers. So I was like going to town, all these things that my body wasn't actually hungry for, because my thoughts about food were, they were still very restrictive. And it wasn't until I went through divorce, and it sort of catalyzed me to eat to live instead of living to eat. And I threw all of these rules out the window because it just wasn't my priority anymore. And when I came back together and sort of started focusing on my health again, my thoughts about food were much more like my childlike self, the way that I had been when I was under a period of duress and, food was not my priority. I was actually paying attention to my hunger cues, and I didn't have drama about it. I didn't care. I didn't care what the food meant. I didn't care what the nutrition of it was. And I realized that the way that I'd been thinking about food, even though on the outside it looked really healthy, actually was hindering me. And now that I have this thought of food is an asset, but I am my own health guru, and I leave it. If I eat whatever it is that's considered traditionally indulgent, I leave that moment there, it's done. Yeah. And then I actually have this like new framework with which to approach it. And I feel like my best self.
I love that. And I love how you said you became your own health guru. And like one of the things we talk about in Stressless Eating is like, no one can become an expert in your body. Nobody can become an expert in your health. You've got to self-advocate, and you've got to take on that responsibility. We can absolutely be influenced and guided by people that can give us the tools, but we have to become a mad scientist, as we're going to talk about, and really figure out, what does that look like for me? Because I think that's a big part of the problem, is everyone's looking for somebody to do it for them, want it for them, learn it for them. And, it's cool. It's a cool thing, because once you do it in the right way, you do it once and you have it forever. And then you have that kind of internal intuition and knowingness. But part of it is like, you've got to become your own health guru, because even the things that some people think are air quotes healthy, it might have a really diseasing effect on somebody and their gastrointestinal system, or maybe they're allergic, or maybe they just don't feel good in certain ways, right? And so part of it is like, if we are looking to somebody else to tell us what to eat and who to be and how to be healthy, we are going to by default just kind of outsource that. And we need to have that ourselves.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Huge. I love it. I love it. So again, we're going to talk about what it looks like to become a stressless cook in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to just get into some of the myths that come up when it comes to, again, if you want to become a stressless cook, if you have beliefs that are keeping you from ever becoming a stressless cook, like you think, oh, it's, so overwhelming, it's so expensive, I'm not good at it, like it takes me away from all these things I'd rather be doing, it's not sustainable, like I need a guru, whatever it is, you're never gonna, again, become the version of yourself that you need to become a stressless cook. So talk to us about some of those mindset myths that come up when it comes to women learning how to cook and becoming, some of the myths that you have to help your clients and followers overcome when they're embarking on becoming a stressless cook.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, a big one is sort of like information overwhelm. It's too much work. I don't have time for all of this, but there's actually a perspective where learning to cook for yourself can save you so much time. It's just like anything else. If you create a structure around it and you practice it, it becomes this easy integrated part of your life. And all of a sudden you actually have cultivated more time, because you're not wondering every single day, what am I going to eat? Am I going to get takeout? Do I need to try this new meal plan? Should I try to throw something together? That can actually end up consuming way more of your time. And in terms of information overload, there's no one telling you that you have to make a different meal every single night for your family. If you just do what I call sort of the Taco Tuesday method, and we'll talk about how you figure out what works for you. you're picking 5 meals that you're then rotating every single week. And frankly, I don't know about you, but if I really love 5 different dishes, I'm happy to eat that once a week. So again, it's really about prioritizing it and deciding that you want to create some kind of a structure. And then all of a sudden it's actually gifting you so much time. Another one is that it's incredibly expensive. And yes, if you go into, the world of wellness Instagram, you're going to find all these specialty ingredients, but actually real whole foods, especially seasonal ones, are very inexpensive. Whole grains are very inexpensive. Beans are inexpensive. Produce is not expensive. And you can find deals on meat, seafood, dairy, all of that in your local grocery store. So that's a pretty easy myth to bust once you just kind of move away from these specialty trendy ingredients and start to focus on actual real food. I think another one is, that it's not sustainable, which really goes back to, again, like creating a framework for yourself that you practice. And just like anything else, I don't know why, but for some reason we act like we're supposed to know how to cook, and as if it's different than learning to play an instrument. Lea Ann references that a lot. So yeah, I mean, those are some of them. There's a lot more, but I think those are some of the first ones that come to mind.
I love it. And talking about this overwhelm and, like you said, it's cooking and in a stressless fashion. If you practice cooking in a really stressful way, it becomes a stressful skill, right? But if you practice it with a system of thinking that is simple and easy, you can actually become a stressless cook. It's really you become whatever you practice. And I love how in Stressless Cooking, you teach my stressless eating clients about this concept of easy is earned. Can you just talk a little bit about the easy is earned philosophy?
Yeah. So it's kind of going back to what I was saying, that for some reason we approach things like cooking, or I think weight loss, as well as I'm just supposed to be able to do it. And why isn't it happening now? But we know that if we're learning a foreign language, we have to practice it. And then you do that enough times, next thing you know, you can speak in a language fluently, but you have to practice it and you have to keep it up. And learning to be a cook, learning to be a stressless cook is no different than that. You just practice it until it becomes easy. So you've earned that easy, fluid relationship that also includes a mentality of mistakes are okay. It's why Julia Child was so popular. She burned things, she dropped things, she cursed. She had such a stressless relationship with the kitchen. She didn't care. And people love that because it allowed them to go into their kitchen and make mistakes. So if you go into it being like, it's cool if I have to throw away a batch of something, it's not a big deal, I won't do that the next time, all of a sudden you start to look forward to being in there because you're not judging yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And easy is earned, like you practice ease and you get to have ease. One of my favorite stories from one of my stressless eating clients that went through the Stressless Cooking little mini course that we give everybody is she grew up in a household talking about beliefs, like having shame about like, oh my gosh, I'm not good at cooking, or I'm not. So she grew up in a household where her mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she would always prepare like a 4-course meal for dinner. So she just had a belief that like, oh, if I'm an air quotes good mom, then I have to prepare a 4-course meal. And one of the things that she, busted that myth when she went through, Stressless Cooking was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be like my mom. And that doesn't make me a bad mom. Like, and these are the things people don't think about. They associate not having a good relationship with cooking or whatever it is with being a bad mom. These are the associations that get made in our brains when we don't become aware of these beliefs. And so part of it is she busted a couple of different myths. A, that she's a bad mom if she doesn't cook a 4-course meal. Right? But also the fact that she doesn't have to cook a 4-course meal to provide her family with an amazing dinner, right? Mind you, this woman had 5 children and like 3 of them were under 15 months because she had 2 twins. And it was great. And I'm like, no, you're an amazing mom, first of all, but it doesn't matter what I say. You've got to address that belief, right? But also we've got to reprogram the belief that you need to make a 5 or 4-course meal in order to give your kids a good dinner. And that was a game changer for her because it wasn't that the cooking was stressful. It was her beliefs about who she was and what she had to do that was causing the stress. And that's why in Stressless Cooking, we started the beliefs and we started the myths.
I love that. Yeah,
love it.
That's amazing.
So cool. So now let's get into some of the nitty gritty. So we talk about in Stressless Cooking about discovering your, what, you call a cooking personality, right? And there's a lot more that's kind of beyond the scope of this episode because we give them an entire like quiz and an audit to figure out what their version of it is. But part of it is like, it's an experiment, which we're going to talk about right after this. But we talk about different cooking personalities, right? And knowing what you are and knowing what you're not, so you mentioned the Taco Tuesday mentality just a few minutes ago, but there's a couple of distinctions that we teach in Stressless Cooking, being a scientist versus being an artist in the kitchen, being an experience-based cook or chef versus a convenience-based cook or chef. And then we talk about like the big batch method versus the Taco Tuesday method. So I know there's a lot and we, obviously can't go through all of them, but can you just kind of touch on this idea of like a cooking personality in general and what it would look like to kind of discover what that is for the people that are listening to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main things to kind of zoom out again and really shut down the information overload and ask yourself realistically, what is your lifestyle and what is your family's lifestyle? First of all, where do you have time? Are you somebody who has time to dedicate, half of a day on a Saturday or Sunday to prepping and cooking, but you really don't have time during the week? Okay, then you're probably somebody who's better off with sort of like a big batch kind of method. If you are someone who really enjoys cooking throughout the week and you have an hour or so, on a weeknight, then you might prefer to do this sort of Taco Tuesday a la carte method where it's like you make the same thing each night of the week and then you repeat that or you don't. And then that kind of dovetails into how much you actually enjoy that experimenting and the creativity versus how much do you really just want to set plan? Because if you just want to set plan, you can be big batch or Taco Tuesday, but you just have to be realistic and say, I'm going to pick 12 meals. I'm going to memorize them. And that's what my family gets. And that's okay. They're so lucky to have that. And I can tweak and experiment to the point where actually they've got 12 meals that everybody loves and everybody looks forward to. So I think asking yourself, where do you have time? Do you like leftovers? A lot of people just don't love leftovers. I personally love leftovers. I don't mind re-eating the same thing. I think Leanne can eat some leftovers too. Mm-hmm. But some people really don't want that. They really want a fresh meal every night. Okay, then realistically, you need to work around that. So just getting clear on who you are, what your family's needs are, and what you enjoy, and then kind of work backwards from there.
Absolutely. And if for anybody listening to this, I really want you to get it. Can you hear how once we're getting into these cooking personalities, part of it is like, this is just the content, right? Of like how you're cooking, figuring out how to do it. But what came before it is really what led up to this, because until you give yourself permission to find your cooking personality, to not feel like you have to fit into a certain box, to not be the spinning image of your mother or whatever the case is for you, until you give yourself permission to really experiment and let yourself figure out what your cooking personality is, what your desires are, what your needs are as a busy person, right? You're never going to be able to give yourself permission to have these conversations and say, hey, what's my cooking personality, right? So this is very different than most women that put themselves in the category of like, I'm a good cook or a bad cook, or I do cook or I don't cook. Now it's like, no, you don't have to be any of those labels. You can literally meet yourself where you are, determine the personality that meets your lifestyle needs, your wants, your desires, and that of your family, and really base this around that. And that's freedom, ladies. That is where the freedom lives. So I love it. So now, we talk a lot about in Stressless Cooking about how it's like a big fat experiment, how your relationship with cooking and becoming a stressless cook, it's not this one and done. You're constantly, just like any experiment, right? First of all, like, you're not a widget. You can't use a cookie cutter plan, right? You've got to be able to figure out what works for you, right? Because anybody listening to this, if you still have a stressful relationship with food and your kitchen, you've probably tried the do this, don't do that approach before, right? And the truth is that if you knew the air quotes right solution, you would probably be doing it right now, right? And the truth is you probably don't. And so we need to go find it. We don't want to look for another person to tell you who to be in the kitchen. You've you've got to figure out what's your cooking personality, what's your version of a stressless cook. And the way that we do that is through experimentation, right? And so everyone here had, fifth grade science where experimentation is about really like, what's the hypothesis? Well, what am I trying to figure out through this experiment? Well, am I this kind of cook? Am I a convenience cook? Am I a big batch cook? All those cooking personalities that we talked about, right? And then comes the actual experiment. Okay, I've got to get in there. I've got to get on the court, so to speak, and figure out what this looks like for me. And then I assess the results. I look at the data and I say, well, this worked and that didn't work. And I'm going to take what worked and leave the rest and go create my next hypothesis and experiment. And it's this ongoing big fat experiment where it's not like if you have one air quotes bad day in the kitchen, you failed, right? It's really about becoming this big mad scientist, as I call it, right? And then go explore. So in terms of experimenting in the kitchen, and again, it means giving yourself permission. Can you talk just a little bit about that experiment mentality when it comes to figuring out your stressless cooking personality?
Yeah, I think first of all, this really does go back to all the work that you do going into it, because this is, to some extent, it is sort of work. But if you've decided that your priority is cooking for yourself and you've established a healthy, relaxed, carefree mindset about it, then the work actually becomes really fun and it becomes this beautiful way to feel your best. And I think one of the reasons people struggle with all the information overload is because they do a lot of going out to restaurants, picking up food, trying different meal plans. So they're eating somebody else's food, which means they don't know what makes them feel good. So really, I think it comes down to practice some dishes and then check in with yourself, check in with your family, whether it's, check in with yourself that night at bed and then check in with yourself the next day. Were you full? Were you hungry? Did you have any digestive distress? Like, what are your energy levels overall? How did you sleep? All of these things. And you will start to see some patterns in these dishes. And so that's sort of from a health perspective, then you can tweak and you can adjust. Maybe I needed a little bit more protein in there to be more satisfied. And actually, maybe my body does really well on some carbs. Like, wow, groundbreaking, which is the case for me personally. And then from a flavor perspective, be like, you know what? I actually think it would have been a little bit better with, some extra seasoning or some spice. And all of a sudden you are the curator of your dream meal, not only in how it tastes, but how it makes you feel. And I don't know anyone who wouldn't want to be able to do that.
Yeah. So cool. And you said, kind of like you're saying, easy as earned, like, yeah, it's work on the front end, but it's work towards a bigger goal. It's not just a work towards that one meal. It's the work towards you becoming the version of yourself in the kitchen that this becomes easier. You get better at it the more you practice it. And you in turn have this amazing relationship with food. And really, it's a beautiful way of connecting with yourself and your body too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. No, it's so incredibly empowering. And it doesn't mean you have to cook every night, but to have these tools in like your arsenal of your wellness, your confidence, your time with your family, that connection, bring kids into the kitchen, let them experiment with you. It's truly invaluable and irreplaceable. And what started off feeling, like work, all of a sudden becomes this really incredibly pleasurable experience that you can't imagine your life without.
Yeah. And food is love. Like, how many of the women listening, they just are such givers. They take care of everyone else. And it's like, you know what? I know I personally love to cook for people, even if I'm concocting something in my experimental way, right? And I'm using the artist approach rather than the scientific or scientist approach. And my cooking personality is probably more of the, artist kind of type. But how good does it feel to just prepare something beautiful, delicious on a plate and just give it to somebody? It's such a gift, that food really is love. And it's just such a cool way, especially when you can feel the love. Like they say, love is felt in the food, there's just something to be said when you are just excited about giving it to somebody because of the energy that went into it. People can feel it,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, tell people how they can find you, follow you, get a hold of you.
Yes. So you can follow me on Instagram at Laura Lea Balanced, or you can go to my website, llbalance.com, or you can email me. And I think we can probably include this information somewhere. You can email me, Laura Lea at llbalance.com. I do have a waitlist for my cooking classes. They just recently opened up. So if you are interested in something like that, I will be opening more down the road, and you can just get in touch with me and we can pop you on there.
Amazing. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else that you want to just impress upon the people that are listening about their relationship with cooking? If you could just leave them with one reminder, what would you say?
I would say that if you are struggling with your relationship with food or your relationship with your body, book a call with Leanne, because she is the best at what she does. And sometimes we really just need some extra support. But again, she is all about the long game. So if this has been an ongoing struggle and you really feel like you could use some hand holding, I promise you she can, if it's the right fit, she can transform your life.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't even going there, but thank you for going there. Well, it is always a pleasure to have you on the podcast, my dear. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your expertise. And ladies, follow her on Instagram, go to her website, check out her recipes. She's got 2 amazing cookbooks, a 3rd on the way, amazing live cooking classes that are sold out. But by the time you listen to this, there might be some dates open up. So we will attach all of that information in the show notes for you to check her out. Laura Lea, amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And ladies that are listening, we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into today's show. If you like what you heard and you're interested in breaking out of your own food, body, and diet prison, here's what I want you to do next. Head on over to stresslesseating.com. That's stresslesseating.com. And sign up to watch the Stressless Eating webinar, where I'll walk you through the exact 5-step game plan my female clients use to conquer emotional eating, self-sabotage, and finally heal themselves from the restrictive all-or-nothing diet mentality for good. But without obsessing or spending years in therapy to address it. I've laid it all out there for you in 5 easy steps. Remember, healing your relationship with food and your body does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance to make it happen, and we've helped clients all over the world take back their power from the food and find true and lasting freedom while enjoying life and warm chocolate chip cookies along the way. To see if we can help you do the same, head on over to stresslesseating.com. I'm Leanne Ellington, and I'll see you next time.